kind of found this time. And sometimes some people grab ankles, or they'll swim over you, or they'll nudge you, or whatever like that. Most of the time, I don't really care. Most people are pretty considerate. But if you're with those same people, you're always going to be around people. In an age group start, you can find clean water because there's enough people in your age group and enough different speeds that you can find yourself some clean water and you can keep going. Now, for all of you proficient swimmers out there that can draft, okay, I can see your point where the self-seated start might be better. But I always prefer the age group because I know I can find clean water and I'm not worried about people going over me, under me, on me, or anything like that. I'm not going to get kicked in the head because I'm too fast. I'm not going to get pulled back because I'm too slow. I'm just going to find my gear and I'm going to do my race. So that's my little anecdote on the self-seated start. So as you come in, you run up the beach and you cross the timing mat and you end up into T1 where it's time to get your bike. Grab your shoes, get on your helmet, walk out, go to the mount line, mount, and you spend the first mile of the bike inside of the park. Once you go off the park, then you end up on regular highway roads. Maybe not highway. I would say busier, but Ironman gets a permit to basically take over the right lane, which is really, really great. It's almost like closing off the road because, the right lane is basically coned off, and every intersection there is police making sure that you can go through the intersection without getting hit. And it's very safe. I had no issues with the bike whatsoever. And it's in and out of some shadier areas where there's plenty of trees, and the roads are pretty good. There are some little bit of rough spots, but they're pretty good. There's not a lot of elevation. There's little bits of some rollers, but I would, even in Tampa and in Florida, I would call them speed bumps. I would not call them hills. Just some rollers. But on the whole, it was a pretty good a course. It kind of goes north. Remember, like I had mentioned before, that T2 was only 6 miles away from T1. So you kind of went north for, about, I don't know, good 20 some odd miles. And then you came back down. And it's one loop. I mean, it's a Midwest town, and it looks like the Midwest. There's trees, there's different houses, there's farms. There was a portion where we'd gotten to some farm area where there was some fresh manure. And that was an interesting smell. But, it's all part of the race. It's all part of the character of it. And I have to say that it's one of the better bike courses. And I definitely will be going back to Ironman Ohio one more time. Maybe not next year, maybe the year after, to try this course again. It's flat. Now, I tend to like rollers. Now, here's the reason why. First of all, I'm a pretty good climber. I'm not like super at it, but I'm a pretty good climber. But I like the idea that I add just a little bit of extra effort to get up the line. But then when I get up, then it's recovery on the way back down. So you put a little bit of extra effort for a lot of recovery, and you can either coast or you can soft pedal or whatever you want. There were a couple of places where we were able to do that here. We didn't have a lot of wind, so everything was pretty much, self-propelled. In a flat course, you have to keep pedaling. So there's the biggest difference that I find between rolling hills like Chattanooga or Augusta and something like Ohio or Florida 70.3. So after that, now the one aspect of the bike course I want to talk about, which was a little bit of a negative to me, I was going pretty well. I was having a really good bike, and about the last 2 miles, you end up on a single track trail. And if you end up with some less experienced bikers, sometimes you'll be stuck and there's no way to get around them. And that was my experience here. And I probably lost a good 5 minutes because people had slowed down and I wasn't able to move around them, and that bugged me a little bit. But that's not always the case. Overall, I'd say the bike course was a lot of fun. So you come into the stadium, and the really nice thing about T2 is so you have to go there, and put the bike down, step into your shoes, grab your belt, and then you head out onto the run. This was probably my favorite part of the course, was the run course. It is what we call a lollipop. So you leave OWU, Ohio Wesleyan University, and you head out onto Henry Street. And there's a little bit of some elevation, actually throughout the course, but you get some little elevation. And so that's like the stick, right? So you go on out, and then you hit a double loop. So you go on out, you make a right, and then there's 2 loops, and then you head back down. So it's kind of like you go up the stick, around the lollipop twice, and then back down the stick, back to the finish line. A great course. I really, really enjoyed it. First, it's somewhat shaded. A lot of trees and some beautiful homes, and it's got some rolling hills in there too, but nothing crazy, nothing like Chattanooga or even Florida 70.3. Just some little rollers, just enough to make it so it's not, I don't know, it's not boring, it's not monotonous. Even with a double loop, it's got some really great terrain and plenty of aid stations. It's typical of Ironman 70.3, where there's an aid station pretty much every mile, which is great. Even at 83 degrees, obviously it's still getting a little bit warm at that point. So especially since you've been on the bike and now you're on the run, and obviously running takes a little bit more heat. So to have an aid station every mile is a lot of it helps. Plenty of sponges, plenty of Gatorade, of Coke, and of Red Bull. So it leaves you with nothing to desire. You really don't need to bring any nutrition on the run unless it's very specifically catered to you. And then you finish out there. You end up going down onto Henry Street, back into the stadium where T2 is, and you do about 200 meters on the track, which is kind of cool, before you end up into the chute and across the finish line. So it's a really great course. After the finish line, it's typical. You have your finisher pictures. They give you your medal. They take your ankle strap, which is your timing chip, and then there's food and everything from that point on. So, on the whole, Ironman Ohio 70.3 is got a decent course. I truly do like the bike and the run course. Not a fan of the swim, but it's nothing different than in any of the other Ironman 70.3 swims out there. Obviously, I would prefer wetsuit swim, but this wasn't going to be one of those. And I'm also not crazy about murky swims, but you can take what you can get. But that's where the challenges come in. I always figure 70.3s with Ironman, there's always one piece of the puzzle that makes it congruent with all the other 70.3s. So you've got one piece of the course that's a little bit harder, or in the case of North Carolina, where it's a very fast swim, but you've got a quarter to half mile run before you get to transition 1, and then you got to carry your bike for a quarter mile before you get to transition 2, and the transitions are so long before you finally cross the mat. You might get an extra half mile of running before you even cross your timing mat to even start the run in North Carolina. This one, it's the swim. It's flat, it's in a lake, it's murky, it's not catered to any traditional type of swimmer. So that's probably where the equalizer is with this course. So that's basically all I've got for this episode of the Inner Fire Endurance Sports Podcast. I hope you enjoyed my review of Ironman 70.3. For all of you that have never done a 70.3, I hope that it might give you an idea into what it's like to be in one. And if not, then I will probably be doing more like this as other races come around. So you'll get another chance to have some sort of experience of what it's like to do an Ironman Triathlon 70.3. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. You can gather any of the other episodes on any place where you get your podcast from. Do me a favor, and if you have any kind of constructive criticism or if you've got any questions, please do me a favor and leave a comment. You can do it on the show notes at innerfireendurance.com or on YouTube or on any of the other places where you find your podcasts. So thank you again, and I hope you continue to spark desire and incinerate limits.